Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Urban Legends video. Another entry here, this one now based on one of your suggestions. I think this one has been suggested since pretty early in my Urban Legends series. In fact, I think it goes back to the Cryptids and Monsters series when I was talking about another particular very similar entry such as this one. I didn't do this one initially only because with the other one that I did a while back, I think it was almost like a year and a half ago, I didn't want to do two of them that seemed very similar to one another. But that other video got pretty good views and it seemed like to be like a really popular subject, and this one keeps getting suggested, so I thought as a favor to everyone here, sure, absolutely, let's go ahead and we'll talk about it. And what I'm referring to is the urban legend known as Mel's Hole. Now, up front, I wanted to go ahead and say that I think that this urban legend can be confirmed as actually being false, and the reason for it is I'll show all the evidence tied to this and showcase what it really is and my belief that this is actually it, but it's not exactly the Mel's Hole that we all thought it was. But first, let's talk about the urban legend status of it and how it came to be. You have to go back to a couple years, not too far back, 1997. February 21st to be exact, whenever this first started. It had to do with a caller called Mel Waters that called in to the famous show Coast to Coast with Art Bell. Coast to Coast, my understanding is it still is ongoing to this day, but it's through different hosts or different iterations of hosts. So this one, though, the Coast to Coast with Art Bell was in its classic form. And back in 1997, it had a huge following. I don't think the following is as big as it is today, but back then, with it being pretty much the only show that was dominant in late night AM radio, it had several million followers. So whenever this incident occurred, February 21st, 1997, it instantly became a very popular subject because with so many people listening in to the show as this guy Mel Waters called and all the information he provided, it was so tantalizing that it instantly became an urban legend. So here's what he said. He called in on that night and he was talking about his experience with regards to a mysterious hole on the ground of his own property. He claimed that it was a hole that was about 9 miles west of Ellensburg, there where he lived. And where things started to get really interesting and very mysterious was this was a hole that was not like any other hole. It was a hole that he claimed went on forever. There was no end to it. So much so that it took on very strange characteristics. People would that lived near and around that area, they would throw in garbage years on end, and yet it would never fill up. People would throw things into it just to try to discern if there was anything as far as, let's say, a sound whenever that thing they threw in actually hit the ground, but no, they could not hear anything. It just seemed to go on forever. It even took on a more mystical term when one guy told Waters, he said he threw his dead dog into the hole, and lo and behold, a couple days later, that's when he found his dog, now alive, roaming around. And the dog didn't recognize him. It seemed like it was a reincarnation of some sort of the dog, but that's the mystical side. And so Waters wanted to go ahead and test anything as far as the hole and see what its characteristics were. He said he took, and this is again him providing all this information when he was calling into the show with Art Bell. He said he took a weighted fish line, which I believe was like basically a weight dangling from the fish line itself. I don't know if it was a rock or some other kind of weight. And all he did was he put himself in a position where he could easily, slowly, put down that line, I guess feet by feet, trying to see when the rock would budge, when it would actually touch ground. But he said he went through several reels of this line, so much so that he began estimating he was reaching about 80,000 feet without it actually touching anything. And that's when he truly realized, you know what, there is absolutely no end to this hole at all. And then in other parts of the show, because he would call back several times later, he would say that the hole took on other very mysterious, like paranormal almost, like characteristics where he had seen apparently a black beam coming straight out of the hole, and people would purposely, I guess somebody had like a radio with them one time and found it by accident. And so when this occurred, people began purposely doing this. They instead started to take portable radios close to the hole's entrance. And when they would do so, they would hear not the current stuff playing on the radio, but rather they would hear programs and music from the past itself. Maybe like a program from the 40s or like music playing from the 1920s. Who knows? But that's the kind of stuff that people would try out and apparently have success. Others would actually take materials close to the hole, and to their surprise, these materials would actually change into other metals or substances. In other words, the composition of the material itself would just outright change. If that occurred, I mean, that would defy all laws of physics, but apparently that's what was happening. So this went on for several years, and further details about Mel Waters and this whole took on almost like a soap opera level. It's too much info to really to put in on here, but during subsequent calls he stated that he lost, I guess, possession of his land. The government came in, mysterious men, I guess almost tantamount to like Men in Black, came in, and what they did was they took away possession of his land, got him to, I guess, some weird way, lease it back to them so that way he could live off of his land, like collect money from it. But the purpose was to get him off of the land. The government wanted to own it outright. And then he said he was living in Australia, and then strange business circumstances happened there where he became broke. It's weird. It takes a whole bunch of weird turns. Again, almost straight like out of a soap opera. If you truly want all that info, check it out when you have a chance. But I didn't really delve into too much here because it went more into Mel Waters' supposed life rather than the hole itself, and I just want to talk about the hole here within this video. But yeah, back to Mel's hole. Now, the reason why I mentioned that all of this, I think, is not the urban legend that we quite say. I'm not saying it's fake. The hole is real, but it's nothing like Mel Waters was claiming to be, was because it's been subsequently found out that there is, in fact, a hole that is pretty much the one that people claim spawned everything associated with Mel Waters' hole. People believe that with regards to Mel Waters, he learned about this hole when he was, let's say, younger, or who knows, growing up around that area, and for whatever reason he just decided to embellish on it. Maybe he wanted attention, maybe he wanted to get some kind of credit for something. Maybe he wanted to sensationalize things and just make it seem, I guess, like I don't know if he wanted to outright lie, but he just wanted to make it seem like it was something else altogether. There is indeed a hole near Ellensburg that fits very closely to everything that Mel Waters was talking about. However, the fact that it's bottomless is far from the truth. In fact, this thing is actually, and you're looking at a picture it there, it used to be a mine shaft of some sort. And the reason why everybody points to this hole is because this is it. Like, people that live there growing up, especially there was one gentleman that I found in an article for dailyrecordnews.com. He was the one that went about and grew up in that area. He later on became somebody that worked for the Department of Natural Resources. His name is Jack Powell, and whenever he heard about what was happening on the Art Bell show, because he was a fan of the show, and when he heard about it, him being a geologist, he immediately knew, oh my God, this is the hole. This is the actual hole that Mel Waters is talking about, especially when Mel kept referring to something being close to Ellensburg. So what this guy Jack Powell did is he drove to that hole, and then he started looking into it because he himself, when he grew up there as a young kid, I mean, he heard about the legend. He played around, in fact, the hole. It turns out that, and this is again why this is all 100% far from the truth and far from the sensational details that I provided a couple minutes back. It turns out it was an old mine shaft. It was an old gold mine shaft that went down at an angle. In fact, he says that most likely it's currently at about 90 feet deep or so. I don't know how he tested it out, but him being a geologist, he was able to at least try to determine the true length of this hole. And he theorized that at the time, when it was an active mine shaft, it probably went as deep as 300 feet deep, but that's about it. So obviously nowhere near 80,000 feet like Mel Waters was claiming. You're looking at that picture too, where it shows him like chucking, stuff into the hole itself, and it looks like a pretty big hole. And in fact, you'll see this other picture here, where it's you can be seen from space almost, as long as like if you have a good set of binoculars from space, but you can see the hole itself. It appears on Google Maps, so it is an actual place. I don't know though if this hole is cordoned off. I mean, obviously the pictures show that there's a barbed wire or some kind of wiring surrounding it to ensure that people don't accidentally go in. But if as far as the hole being like on private property, I'm not sure if it's private property or if it's owned by the government or anything like that. But if you ever are near that area and you wanted to go ahead and pay a visit, stop by near Ellensburg, and then you'll no doubt talking to anybody there, they'll point you to the right direction. Here's why this guy Powell also says that anything involving claims of Mel's hole, let's say if this wasn't the hole, but Mel really did have a hole somewhere else, he said the claims of it being 80,000 feet deep just wouldn't work at all. The furthest known hole dug ever was by the Russians in, I think it was 1989, and it went down about 40,230 feet. But even then, that wasn't like a mine shaft hole. That was just a hole that I believe was trying to be like drilled either for scientific purposes or for oil itself. One of those two. I think it was more for the scientific purposes, but that was the deepest known hole ever drilled, let alone, I mean, and we're talking about a hole probably the size of let's say a hand or some sort. That's not a mine shaft. That's just very tiny. The deepest mine shaft ever, though, was known to have been drilled about 12,000 feet. Again, far shyer than 80,000 feet like Mel's hole that he was describing to Art Bell. And the reason he says this is because him being a geologist, he says it's physically impossible. The deeper a hole is drilled, especially if let's say it's a larger hole, it tends to collapse under itself from the pressure. So if anything is dug really deep, the further deeper you get, the pressure increases exponentially, and it becomes harder to keep that hole open and harder to further drill. I'm not saying that something else could be causing it naturally, but if somebody if it is, then it's all again defying any laws of physics. And then also there's some subsequent amount of heat. The way he describes it is the deeper you go, the deeper a hole goes, there's more heat that's from the surrounding strata. I'm not really sure what that is, but I guess it definitely relates to the hole itself, and so that prevents further drillings or further abilities for the hole to go deeper altogether. But that's him. I mean, that's his description, and he's the geologist, so he's using scientific facts, and that's why, at least with regards to Mel's hole, his claims again of it being 80,000 feet or so, that's way off base. That would not be something true. But yeah, otherwise that's the urban legend regarding Mel's hole. Sorry for the letdown, but yeah, it is, at least in my opinion, it's not true in the sense of Mel Waters' claim. But what is true is everything involving the hole itself being real. Obviously, to this day, there are other holes that are on Earth that are much larger and much deeper than anything else. In fact, you're looking at one here. I believe this is a diamond mine of some sort. It is so massive, so large, and so deep that planes and anything else, helicopters, they're not allowed to go above or near anything involving this hole because the wind surrounding it, the vortexes are so powerful that they would immediately draw anything in to the hole itself. Can you imagine something like this? It looks fantastic. I mean, it looks very imposing to see something like this, the massive size of this. That's to give you an idea of like, let's say, what a truly big and deep and powerful hole on Earth is, as opposed to Mel's hole, which was again had so many sensational aspects to it. So otherwise, that's it, everybody. If anyone has any more info regarding Mel's hole, I think his last known call that he made was sometime, I believe, in 2002. Then that was it. He did not provide any more info. He didn't provide any more calls. I think it was by that point the jig was kind of up. Too many people were. It got to the point where too many people were thinking to themselves, all right, this guy, if he keeps calling and he's not providing more further detail, like concrete info, no pun intended, then what is his point of calling? It's that red flag where people feel where, okay, what's the address? And then the person keeps avoiding and vaguely just discussing where it could be, but doesn't provide the actual info. After several times of doing that, you would become annoyed. And you would start thinking, okay, this person is making it up. And I think that's where things got to that point with regards to Mel Waters and his hole and the way he kept calling into Art Bell. But if anyone has any more info about any other appearances or any other calls or anything else tied to Mel's hole, please post those comments below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.